The video you're about to see is a series of short clips strung together that I'm going to use to describe and talk about some common mechanisms at play in leash reactivity, especially what I call internal and external reinforcement, but a variety of other factors as well. The videos are part of my young dog Snug's protection work development. So in the video, I'm not going to really talk about how it applies to protection work and sport protection work, etc., but it's part of his development and part of developing a protection dog. In my membership, all the unedited video will be in my video training journal, and I'll talk about what my goals for the sessions were, what were intended, why we did what we did, as far as it pertains to protection work. But here, I'm using it as an example, a kind of safe example, to demonstrate what happens sometimes during leash reactivity. When we're dealing with reactive dogs, it's not safe or appropriate to continue to trigger them. And so here's kind of a safe way for me to talk about these concepts. I'll draw your attention to a few different things before the video starts, and then as we get into it, I'll explain what's going on, and I'll pause to draw your attention to other features. But one that's super important is that I'm walking the dog on a harness. Again, I've talked a little bit about harnesses. We use them extensively. They're a wonderful tool, but like any tool, they can be misused or used inappropriately. And young dogs out in the world on harnesses frequently contribute to some of the leash reactivity problems we're talking about. It's more difficult to direct their energy away from things. The restraint on the harness can create frustration, etc. So I'll draw your attention to that. The other factors that I'm going to talk about is what's reinforcing for the dog in this activity, and how does this get started, and why does it develop, and why does it persist.
So I'm going to set the stage here for a second first. So this was the first repetition. This is where it starts. I am walking my young dog on a harness. We're walking back in through this bushy area, and there's a person back in the woods and kind of crouched down. And as I walk that way, the person will stand up and start to approach him. He's on a harness, he's relaxed, he's just kind of cruising along, just like a normal walk. There he notices something, and he stiffens, stares. Person's now he's a little anxious, he's scared, right? So he checks with me, he thinks about taking off, he threatens a little bit. I pull back on the leash, right, which makes him feel there, a big response, right? So he wanted to leave, right? So as the person approached, he wanted to leave, but the leash was blocking him from leaving. So that's a huge factor in leash reactivity, right? The dog has limited ability to move away from things. Again, of course, here we're pushing, so he's barking at that thing, but still anxious. It's hard to see from this angle. The rest of the video will be better. But from this angle, there's a lot of piloerection, meaning the hair standing up all along his back. He's threatening, his barking is really choppy and explosive. That's kind of common defensive or threatened barking. And then you can imagine if, obviously it wouldn't go on like this if it were a situation, leash reactivity situation on the street, but let's say the person approached, my dog blew up, and the person stopped approaching and then left, like happened there, right, at the end of that. And then let's say I continue on my walk, right, off we go, there we go. Let me pause here for a sec. So what happens if that's the case, right, that's classic external reinforcement happening, meaning the dog is being reinforced by the environment operantly or instrumentally, however you want to talk about it. So something approaches, the dog is stressed, anxious, afraid, the dog threatens, and the approach stops, or either retreats, you pull the dog away, or just stops the advancing. That relieves the dog's stress. So what relieves the dog's stress? Their aggressive response, the fact that they threatened. And now that behavior has been reinforced externally. When I begin to talk about internal reinforcement, and this can happen in a wide variety of ways in leash reactivity, the handler could inadvertently reinforce it by saying, "It's okay, buddy, it's all right." They could inadvertently reinforce it by pulling back on the leash when the dog's on a harness, which makes the dog want to go forward, and now they feel supported, and sort of emboldens their response. And then the environment itself, usually the approaching person or dog stops approaching when your dog erupts, or crosses the street, leaves, whatever that's going to be, or you take your dog away, all of which reinforce it. Internal reinforcement comes, or you also hear me call it self-reinforcement, comes with a certain type of dog. A lot of working type breeds and mixes of working type breeds get some satisfaction from aggressive and predatory responses, even if they're initially governed by anxiety. So here's a second repetition. So that was in the evening. The next day, we are back at the same location, and I'm walking into the same spot. He's very quick to react here. And so the person was far away. Same location, he was kind of hyper vigilant because of that. Person was far away, he barked, and the person turned and left. Right? So that happens all the time on walks, right? Your dog barks at something, and then you keep on walking, or whatever they barked off disappears, walks away, turns off onto another road, whatever that's going to be. Here's the third repetition. Same day, right? So now we're walking down again to the same spot. And he's already a little more vigilant. Remember the first repetition walking into this area? He was kind of relaxed. Now he's a little bit more vigilant. And as soon as he sees him, the person was sitting out there, as soon as he sees him, he starts threatening. See all the hair up on his back? That piloerection, that's a threat display. But he's not backing up so much anymore. There was the key moment. Pause. I'm going to go back and show you that again. So in that, the person stood there for a little bit, and he's barking at them. The person took a step forward, and then Snug was going to bail. He's like, I don't know about this, and he started to back up. And then he lunged forward. And when he lunged forward, the person turned and left. All right? So you can see a scenario in which this easily happens inadvertently on the street. So I'm going to go back just a touch so you can watch this. And then watch what it does to his response after that. He's barking, threatening, but he's still not completely sure. Oh, comes forward, and then he runs and lunges, and then the person leaves. So that strongly reinforced his lunging forward at the person and barking at the person. At the end of that, we're walking off. Out he goes. Like we continued on with our walk, as it were. Fourth repetition. Right, so now he's already aroused coming into the space. So watch, as I'm coming, not only is he kind of actively pulling me to that area, but he's already growling and starting to be aroused as we come into the space. He hasn't seen anyone yet. So imagine you're on a walk in your neighborhood, right? You walk around the same block all the time, and there's spots along that walk where either a dog's charged a fence at you or something surprising happened to your dog earlier in their life. And now the dog begins to recognize those areas, and they bring a Pavlovian arousal to the location. So now they come into that location and they're already stimulated and they're looking for something. Now he barks as soon as he sees him, and he's trying to pull me to get to him. So all of the avoidance, he's beginning to find this internally reinforcing. His bark's different now. He's barking very rhythmically. And when he comes forward, the dog doesn't try to back up at all. He tries hard to get to him. As he threatens, now the dog tries harder to get to him and shows increased aggression. The dog is willing to bite him at that spot. And so what went from a dog that was scared has now, in 4 repetitions, become a dog that's actively seeking that. You can see as I try to pull him away, here's the next repetition. Now he's really pulling me out there. Each of these repetitions, he knows what's up. He's looking. And the person, in this case, is doing less and less each time. Now, Stuart here is obviously giving a very frontal threat, but it's not at all uncommon in the real world to have people stare at your dog, people that don't know any better. They may not creep up on you like that, but they'll stare at your dog, or they'll stand there and stare, and your dog's barking, and they may be saying like, geez, what's wrong with your dog, as they sit there and approach or try to walk past you, or whatever that's going to be, right? And the more I pull back on the harness, the more the dog wants to go forward. And each time his intensity gets stronger to the point where there's no trying to avoid it. He's actively trying to get to it. And of course, my continue to follow him, that's deliberate for what we're doing. But imagine that your dog barked at somebody, they left, and then you went forward in the same direction. So in their mind, that's become the way that they deal with this. So there's not only is it alleviating their stress by acting aggressively, by driving the thing away or getting them out of the situation, but on top of that, they're rehearsing what for a certain type of dog becomes a highly internally reinforcing behavior. Yeah, he's woofing and growling as he comes into the space. Now he's just barking at a person sitting there. So you can imagine how this could escalate, right? So your dog initially, there was some interaction between the dog and the person, or another dog. Maybe another dog came and barked at your dog. Maybe there was some kind of give and take interaction in the beginning. But increasingly, your dog is getting not only to enjoy the activity, but they're getting aroused in these sorts of circumstances, and they're more likely to bark at other things. On one of the repetitions, as I walked him towards the area, he turned and growled and barked at one of the camera people, right? So the mood that's being constructed is transferring to other things in the environment as well. So now he's really pulling me out there, and he's willing to bark at somebody that's sitting there doing nothing. Any movement on their part, and he escalates. And again, what was a stressful experience for him is now something he's actively seeking. He wants to do this. He likes it. He gets a charge out of it, right? And this is true of a lot of dogs: German Shepherds, Rottweilers, Dobermans, Malinois, Dutch Shepherds, Giant Schnauzers, and mixes, Molossers. There's a whole wide variety of dogs that are going to get some satisfaction from aggressive responses. They've been selected for that. And then we have all kinds of mixes of the above breeds. And there are breeds that haven't been bred for this type of thing that still get some kind of charge. So here's the final repetition. He's actively pulling me to get to the spot. He's looking for it. He's initiating the aggression without any provocation from the person. His intensity's different. Much less threat display, and he actively trying to get to it. None of the piloaggression on the upper back. He shows a lot of threat here and a lot of aggression, willingness to bite the person. And now instead of retreating, the person comes closer, but doesn't change his mind at all. So in 8 practices of this over the course of 2.5 days, his perception of feeling scared is gone, and he's now looking actively to engage in this activity. And here, the person didn't flight. The person just stayed there, and I went and pulled him away. So there you have it. That is a common progression that can happen in which a dog starts out afraid and through rehearsal begins to actually seek certain kinds of activities.